stress is a pain amplifier. As much as we want to say mind and body are separate, they 100% are not. If something hurts and it's related to movement, we're probably going to be able to help you. I cannot tell you how many times we've helped people with low back pain and hardly touch their back at all, but spend a ton of time on their hips. If years of stretching every day didn't get the job done, I'm not so sure another day is going to make a difference for you.
So breathing well can help us to reduce pain.
Without question.
Dan Swinscoe is a master's trained physical therapist and strength and conditioning specialist with over 30 years of experience helping people to move better, feel better, and play better. He's recognized by Golf Digest as one of the top fitness trainers in the world. And Dan works with amateur and pro players of all ages, specializing in performance, injury prevention, and longevity. This episode is so important for individuals who've experienced pain, injuries, or again, just if you're living an active life, stuff happens. This is going to be an invaluable resource for everybody. And you're going to walk away with some incredible insights and tips. But I want to start off with what physical therapy actually is, because I don't think a lot of people actually connect to what it means.
Yeah, it's a relatively young profession, but we're the movement people. Physical therapy is very diverse. There are some that work just like with burns. There's some that work with like neonatology. There's some that work in ergonomics, and then there's me in outpatient orthopedics. So there's quite a gamut, but for me in outpatient orthopedics, we're the movement people. So if something doesn't move well, if it's not uncomfortable, I told the kids when they're little, Daddy's an owie fixer. So the easiest way of thinking, if something hurts and it's related to movement, we're probably going to be able to help you.
Awesome. And so with you and my experience with you, the therapy part was a big part of it, because again, we tend to think of like physical recovery, we're doing like exercises, but there's a huge therapy component to it all. Talk about that.
Talk people off the ledge, you mean? Yeah. So much of it is just understanding. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a lady not that long ago who got hurt putting a dish into the dishwasher. Now, she was in agonizing pain. She could hardly move. I had to help her understand you don't truly believe tissue damage happened just because you went like that. So no question you're hurting, but big question whether or not you actually creating physical harm. And so having people understand that hurt and harm are not equal, that if you look at MRI studies of people who feel fine, asymptomatic MRI findings, and they're all over the gamut. I'm giving a talk next month up in Washington, and I've got site after site after site citation where we're exploring, like in cervical spines, 20-year-olds, 17% of 20-year-olds, the perfect people who've got all their cartilage and everything, 17% of them have a diagnosable finding on their neck MRI. When I was in PT school, they told us that if you see a disc bulging and encroaching upon the spinal cord, that could be a medical emergency. And come to find out, 8% of people who feel fine have that. So as time goes on and MRIs get less expensive and more studies are done on people who feel fine, we realize that if you're in pain, you may very well have tissue damage, but just because you have tissue damage doesn't mean you can't feel normal again, because substantial percentages of normal people have that. Like I said, with the next 17% of 20-year-olds have diagnosable findings. By the time you got up to 60-year-olds, it was 85% of people who are symptom-free 60-year-olds have diagnosable findings on their neck MRI. So whatever body part it might be, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, we need to hear that as well. Because,
sure.
Obviously, like you just said, the access to imaging has exponential growth happening right now. Ease. I mean, even, if I'm thinking about when I was 20 years old dealing with the degenerative disc issue.
Yeah, you're an unusual 20-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, it was every part of it was complex and expensive to do. And now, 20
and
plus.
Scary.
Right. That part. Right. And so, but 20 plus years later, the accessibility, it's used a lot more. And oftentimes, and this is something I want you to talk about, it's something that we jump to. Like, we want to get an image done because we're in pain and we think that we have some damage. And if you can you talk about some of the concerns around imaging and putting too much of our stock into imaging?
Yeah, imaging is a piece of a puzzle. That's all, right? It's not to say that it's not valuable, because it is for sure. But I know I haven't seen the data, but I've seen people who I know quote data saying that if your first step in back pain is an MRI, your recovery takes longer and costs more. So, and I think it's probably because of these, 60% of all asymptomatic people have got something somewhere in their lumbar spine, diagnosable findings again. So, recognizing that oftentimes people say, I'm going to get an MRI to see what's going on. And that's not really accurate. When you get an MRI, you see what has happened. We were just talking about the beautiful neighborhood we have here in Southern California. If you and I went for a walk down the road and we're taking in the beautiful views and we're looking at stuff, and then we go by a house that had burned down. Wow, I wonder what happened. Was there a gas leak? Was it arson? Did they fall asleep with a cigarette? What happened? You have no way of knowing. All you know is the house burned down. Was it last week, last month, last year? We don't know. All we know is the house burned down. And that's very similar with an MRI. You can see what has happened. It's there. You can't deny that. But there's a lot of question of whether or not that finding is the reason you hurt. And even more question if that finding is the reason why you can't feel better again. Right? So that's how I look at that. People say, I want to rush and get an MRI. I'm like, well, I mean, if it says you have cancer, it's going to change your course of care. But if it doesn't, and no one thinks you do, then we can probably reel that in a little bit and let's have conservative measures fail first before we feel like we need to go there. And the reason, like in a low back as an example, where you might want to get an MRI, if things just aren't getting better for whatever reason, is one of the possibilities you can have to up the ante is maybe get an epidural injection or something like that. And that never happens without an MRI, so they can be more accurate when they place it. So yeah, an MRI is nice. But it's a piece of the puzzle, but you have these other pieces too. And how you move, I think, might be more important, because people who move well with crummy MRIs feel fine. And people with a perfect MRI that move crummy hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that movement piece might actually be a bigger piece, even though it's low tech, no tech.
Yeah. Yep. It's medicine.
Yeah.
Movement is medicine.
For sure.
And the best way that I think about this in terms of like the MRI is like a snapshot. It's a static image. It's a static image. Of course, we can get basically, we can be able to look at this in more of like a 3D context in certain ways and look at the spine or the site of an injury in all these different dynamic ways, but it's still a snapshot in a very dynamic, constantly moving and evolving body.
Right.
And so, like you said, like we've got some really interesting data on this, like in having a bad diagnosis on an MRI and taking longer to heal versus if you didn't have that thing. Right? Because of the mindset attached to it and buying into like, I have this problem, this permanent fixed problem, because I'm looking at a permanent fixed image and missing out on how much movement can be medicine and get us back feeling better faster.
Yeah. I had another person you just reminded me of that was upper 50s. I don't remember her exact age, but it was something in that ballpark. And she had seen the doc first, and she saw the doc, got an MRI, then saw me once, and then got the MRI results after that. So then she's seeing me for visit number 2 and telling me about all these MRI findings. And she was mentally a mess. And I said, well, do you have it? Can I read it? Yeah. She pulls it up on her phone. And it basically said, you're 57 years old or whatever she was, you have gray hair. Like another way of saying mild degeneration, mild spondylosis, mild degenerative this, mild degenerative that, is you got a 57-year-old spine, right? A brand new car looks different than one with 50,000 miles on it. Doesn't mean it's not a great car, right? But you can tell it's just, age-related normal is not that different way of saying you have mild degenerative this and mild degenerative that, in my opinion. And that's how and she told me, oh, you've given me hope. I'm like, well, yeah, I hope so, right? I hope you have a hope. There's like, did you think, it's just time for the glue factory here at 57? Like, it's not usually as bad as it sounds.
Yeah. Let's dive into some of these mistakes people make when dealing with pain.
Okay.
And one of them that you brought to my attention is this tendency that we have to chase pain. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, let's say the back is, since we were just talking about that, my back hurts, rub my back, inject my back, whatever. The lumbar spine is a part of the body that's really not meant to move very much. But right next to it are some ball and socket hip joints that are meant to move a lot. And if the thing that's supposed to move a lot doesn't, then the things adjacent to it are going to move extra. to make up for that.
Compensation.
Yeah. And so it's very easy. I was explained to me once, I really love this analogy, that you can think of your disc as like a credit card. If you're old enough to remember the days before a shredder and you got your new credit card in the mail, you take that old credit card and you try to bend it. And the first time you try to bend it, it's really hard to bend it. And then you bend it back and forth a few times. Then there's a little bit of a white line in the colored plastic, and then eventually a little crease, and eventually it breaks. Well, our discs are similar to that. And so if these movements over and over again with your activities of daily living, whatever they are, which could include sitting, because right now I have this angle at my hip that should be having my upright body weight loaded across my hip joint. If my hip can't accommodate this angle, then my pelvis rolls back, and now those forces just moved a little bit over from here to here, and now they're on my disc. But if movements that are supposed to be in the hip aren't, they just get translated right up to the next thing. And so then it's going to wear out over time, and you'll see that. So when you talk about chasing pain, I cannot tell you how many times we've helped people with low back pain and hardly touch their back at all, but spend a ton of time on their hips.
Since we're talking about the spine, I just want to stay here really quickly, because one of these things that really changed my mindset, because, and you know me, like I'm very kind of data driven. I'm kind of analytical.
Kinda.
And so I love the application piece and I love the intuition piece. But for the way my mind is set up, I love to have data to kind of hang things on. And again, an MRI can be, in some ways, it can be a feeling of resolution or relief, right? To know like, okay, well, this is right. But very often it can be something that can mentally trap us and put a big burden, like a nocebo effect.
For sure.
Right?
I battle that all the time.
Yeah. And this is such an incredible analysis. And this was published in the journal Clinical Rehabilitation. It's titled Probability of Spontaneous Regression of Lumbar Herniated Disc. All right. Spontaneous regression, right? Okay. That means like, we don't know how it happened.
But there it is.
And so this was a review of 31 studies, and it found that up to 96% of various forms of disc injuries had significant improvements without invasive treatments. In fact, one subset of sequestered disc injuries, this is when they're
the sequestered fragment,
straight up broken,
bad
basically.
Problem. Yep.
Like the worst type of disc injury, what you would think on an MRI again. Mm-hmm. Sequestered disc injuries showed complete resolution of the injury 43% of the time.
That's important for people to know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Again, when you go back in time, when I was in PT school, a sequestered fragment was a surgical problem. And now we know the body reabsorbs them sometimes. And so, it's just an important thing to give people a chance. I think an interesting maybe connection is if you look at the amount of disability from injuries based on what your job is, people who are self-employed, I don't work, I don't eat, those kinds of people get better faster. Isn't that interesting? Because they don't have the luxury of sitting around. Now, I'm not saying these other people are sitting around eating bonbons or pushing this. I'm saying that if push comes to shove and you have to get up and do stuff, the act of getting up and do stuff seems to actually be helpful. Mm. And so those people just get better faster. But it was forced upon them, right? But that's an interesting possible connection of what you were just talking about.
Now, what about this phenomenon, especially when, again, chasing pain, when there's, quote, no reason for the pain to be there?
I love that. Yeah, there's always a reason. A reason I get, like, another very common painful place for people have pain is shoulder. And of course, my shoulder hurts. And you do some rotator cuff resisted tests, and the doc says, I got rotator cuff tendonitis, told me to take some anti-inflammatories and go see you. Okay. And you do the rotator cuff resisted tests, and they're strong. It just elicits some pain. But then you reposition the shoulder blade from this posture to that posture, and all of a sudden now they're strong. Doesn't hurt at all. Mm. And I love it when that happens. I'm like, so apparently if we move your shoulder blade a little bit, it took away all your inflammation, huh? Yeah. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'm being silly on purpose. If we just reposition your shoulder blade, get you out of this forward anteriorly tilted position that puts everything at a mechanical disadvantage here, kind of puts the roof over the top of the socket, and you resist it there, it doesn't feel so good. But if we reposition and create some space there, all of a sudden your shoulder can resist just fine. We see that a lot. We see a lot of people who don't have good upward rotation. So you ask them to raise their arm, like, yeah, that's my pain. And then I'll get behind them and I'll hook my thumb on the backside of their shoulder blade and help it elevate as they're raising their arm. Pain's gone. I'm like, okay, we just have to work on upward rotation. And the cool thing about that is in a couple of days, they're pain-free because the drill works so well. And somebody else was saying, maybe you need drugs, maybe you need an MRI to you know what I mean? It's just, there's so many things that you can do if you just recognize, okay, I use the term, I'm just going to fix your function. So if we don't worry about what tissue in the shoulder hurts, we just say, what functional thing can you not do? I can't raise my arm. I can't lift overhead. I can't reach for the top shelf, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, let's start looking at the things that are required to effectively raise your arm overhead. And we find the things that don't look right, fix those and reevaluate. Rather than thinking, is it a bursa? Is it a disc? Is it one of the rotator cuff tendons or something? Let's not worry about that so much. Let's look at the function. And if the functional limit is I can't lift overhead without pain, regardless of what tissue it might be inflaming at the moment, if we just allow you the way to lift overhead, and then the pain and inflammation just go away and they're back to where they were. And it's fast that way, right? So it's amazing how you can do stuff. The drill that I use, I have them do 5 reps. It's just this little wall slide drill. And that hurts? Yep. All right, come here. Show them how to do the drill. Do 5 of them. Give them full effort. Step away. How's it now? Oh my gosh, that's better. Okay, do that every day. And a few days later, like, man, I can't believe it doesn't hurt now.
Yeah.
It's simple if you just look at the related pieces and not chase the pain. Otherwise, you'll find a tender rotator cuff, right? You'll find something to massage. You'll find something to needle. You'll find something to ice, stim, whatever plug in the wall modality is your favorite. And you'll find reasons to do that. Don't have to, probably.
So, question for you.
Sure.
I found that standard of care when dealing with pain and or injuries is often, if they're not working with the highly evolved, skilled physical therapist, is to stop movement, right? Incapacitate the joint, the muscle, just stop moving it.
Right.
Is that the best? And I already know the answer to this. Is that the ideal way to go about this? Should we stop training completely if we're experiencing some pain and discomfort? We're going to keep this simple, and we're not saying like this is excruciating pain, like there's an acute situation here. Of course, if that's a situation, we want everything to the inflammation to go down. But should we start training and trying to get some movement inputs into that area as soon as possible?
Absolutely.
Or should we be training around that injury?
Yes and yes. Yeah. So I use the term specific rest. So if we use the shoulder as an example, again, if it only hurts to lift overhead and it only hurts to push overhead, can you pull from overhead down? Right? So maybe the weight actually assists you up and the effort is down. How are you here with horizontal push and pull? You cool with that? How are you if you weight bear through your hand versus your hand in the air? Absolutely everything. I mean, I work with a lot of personal trainers and I always keep them moving, keep them going. I'll tell you the red light, the green light, and the yellow light activities, and most of the time you can just delineate it that way. At this time, these things, red light, these are a bad idea right now. You can bet that if we do these things, we're going to make matters worse. These other things, you can bet that if we do things, you're going to be fine. The yellow light things in the middle, these are ones that are questionable. So if these really need to be trained, train them super carefully with loads you're familiar with speed you have great control over, et cetera. But seldomly do you have to, I think it's foolish to quit and do everything, right? Just movement is good for a human being and their psyche too. Like you were talking about before, the therapy side of physical therapy, it feels good to move and it feels terrible to not be able to do anything or to want to do something and be afraid that, man, my shoulder hurts. If I do anything, I'm going to make it worse, right? Yeah. There's almost always stuff you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to circle back really quickly to the, chasing pain and I didn't do anything, right? If you don't have any particular traumatic thing or something, you can this thing happened and then I had pain. And if you don't have a rational reason, we'll just say somebody, and this is a great question. Okay. We'll say somebody had an injury, a shoulder injury, but it's resolved. There's no tissue damage. Everything looks good. They've got all the checks, and they go maybe a year without having an issue. And then suddenly they're experiencing pain, but they can't find a way that actually something happened. Right. And so they're like racking their mind, like, I didn't do anything. Why is my shoulder hurting?
Yeah.
What are some of the reasons that something like that can kind of manifest?
Well, so many times, this is kind of what comes in, like if we use the shoulder again as an example, I think the shoulder, as much as anything, is like an orchestra. If your orchestra is making noise instead of music, was it that guy's flute or that guy's French horn or that drum or that cymbal or that violin? There's a lot of moving pieces, right? And so you could have, from the accident or the previous injury a year ago, and felt like you're fully recovered from it, maybe there's some scar tissue there that now, because workload got a little heavier, the scar tissue that was there and previously you were adapted with that just fine, but now because you've been spending 12 hours a day in a chair, that maybe now you no longer can overcome both of those two little imperfections where before you could. I had a lady, I'll never forget, I couldn't tell your name if my life depended on it, but I remember her story so well. I was having her see me what I was expecting to be her last visit. She was doing great. I gave her some time on her own, checked back with me in 3 weeks or a month or whatever it was. And this was that day. And she came in and she was a mess. And it blew me away that she was hurting so bad. And I'm like, did you I'm running through all the questions of all the things, right, that we knew were problematic for you. And I'm like, and I just threw it out there, like, what about stress? And then all of a sudden her face changed. I'm like, oh, do you remember something? She goes, my mom died last week. So stress is a pain amplifier. I've seen that over and over and over again. So for the person who maybe they had something a long time ago, if there's those, mental, emotional, as much as we want to say mind and body are separate, they 100% are not. And so maybe something like that. There's always a reason, though. My favorite reason for someone coming in is to tell me there's no reason, because that means I have to sleuth, and the sleuthing is the fun part, right?
Yeah. So you're a body detective, man.
Yeah, exactly.
This is an important point, and thank you so much for this. Every single person listening, please remember this: how impactful stress can be on our biology. Right? We tend to think that this is calorie free, it's invisible, and it doesn't really affect us like that. But we know every single part of our physiology can be impacted by stress.
For sure. With
that being said, maybe the site again of that old injury, maybe it's a back injury that happened, maybe it's a knee injury, maybe it's the shoulder, but you're experiencing some life stress, or maybe it's not an acute thing, maybe it's just a chronic buildup of things that just went unprocessed. These nociceptors, right, that we have in our tissues that transmit pain, it can literally kind of activate. It's like a channel that can activate and express pain when we're carrying around a lot of psychological. One of the things that we know today is that psychological stress can increase inflammation in the body.
Amazing.
In a myriad of ways. And so again, we might be in a situation where we're chasing pain, like nothing happened, I didn't do anything, but why am I in pain?
Yeah.
And having the investigation capacity, get your Pink Panther on and look into your body and like, to be honest, like, what's going on in my life?
Yeah.
Like, am I experiencing a buildup of stress, or am I not processing things? Am I moving too quickly? Am I not moving enough? You've got to be your own detective.
Yeah. You just reminded me of another person I worked not that long ago that we were helping recover from back pain, and we were starting to get deadlifts going a little bit heavy. And he's like, hey, I'm kind of feeling that in my back. I'm like, what does feeling that mean? What does that mean? And basically what it described is muscular effort, right? But his brain is very sensitive to stress going through that part of him. And I think it was just sending his brain a little check engine light. That's the example I use sometimes. I said, well, your form was perfect. You didn't have any pain during, but now your back's just sensitive. Yeah. I said, that's probably what that is. And he goes, you feel confident about that? I said, yeah. Do you? He goes, I think so. And we kept going. How's your back? I'm fine. It's just sometimes the nervous system just checks in, says hello, right? And you just have to sometimes use reasoning about like, okay, you're under some load here, but you're managing it perfectly. I think anybody who understands how to deadlift would look at this person's form and say that's really good form. And they didn't feel anything anywhere they weren't supposed to at the time. But obviously when you deadlift, your back muscles work, right? That's a good thing. But if in the past, whenever his muscles had that contraction, maybe it was from a straining kind of experience, something, I said, just if you feel good about it, I feel good about it. I'm not worried about you here. If you're willing to keep going, let's keep going. And he just felt better and better and better as he went.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
All right. If you could, and the thing is, since we don't have somebody who's a patient right in front of you that's dealing with a very specific issue, this is kind of holistic. We're looking at overall insights, right? And so somebody's recovering from an injury, right? They experience an injury, they come to see you. I don't want to put a label on it, but I guess again we got to kind of use an example. But maybe again it's a lumbar issue.
Okay.
The reason I'm thinking about this, Joe Montana. All right, I just watched the Joe Montana documentary, which was fantastic.
Right. I haven't seen it. I'm gonna have to go find it.
I think it's on the Peacock. There's so many apps, by the way.
Right, I know.
But it's so well done. And there was a game where he felt something during the game, ended up being a disc injury, and he had back surgery like almost immediately. And the prognosis was he'd be out for the rest of the season. We'll just say like this was week 2, all right? And there was no rush. But in his mind, there was.
Because he knew who was on the bench behind him.
Yeah, right,
That's pretty good.
That guy. But he came back 7 weeks later.
I don't remember that, but that's...
weeks. I had no idea that something like that happened.
Well, he was... Art White and the San Francisco Spine Institute were the people, as I recall, that took care of him. And they're kind of the beginnings of what we understand as stabilization exercises now. That was kind of ground zero.
Come on. You see this?
Yeah, there you go.
And so... early on, he was very low. He was very depressed. He didn't want to, right? He was afraid. He was afraid, and also he was apprehensive to do stuff. And somebody challenged him to, like, if you say you want to do this, do it, right? And then you see like clips of him training in the pool.
There you go.
Right? Being able to build that confidence. And again, long story short, him coming back from this back surgery 7 weeks later is insane.
Yeah.
But it was possible because not only that, he came back and he performed at a high level.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so with that being said, what are some of the principles when you have a patient that's coming in, they're lacking confidence, they're afraid, like you just mentioned your guy doing the deadlifts. What are some of the steps that you're taking to build their body back and also to build their confidence back?
Give you a couple examples. The person who walks in crooked, like you feel sorry for them to have to get in their car, get to you, get out of the car, and physically get to, because you can see every movement is just agonizing for them. Some basically Stu McGill oriented training of you use the same principles we would use in training, like for powerlifting, like to lock your lats and spread the floor when you squat and things like that. If you're in agonizing back pain, they say, hey, Shawn, are you expecting your back to hurt when you stand up out of that chair? Yeah. And let's say you're not a weightlifter and you program computers for a living or you sell widgets or whatever. And you don't know those cues that are really common in the world of weightlifting. I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to pull your arms down like this. Can you do that? And you do that. You see, you feel how that makes things tight? Yeah. Now, as you sit up, do that as hard as you can. How's your pain? If that better or not, then we just start doing cue after cue after cue of bracing from lat, abs, glutes, frontal plane, glutes, transverse plane. We do whatever we need to do till he gets up and goes, oh my gosh, that didn't hurt. And I 100% expect to have him say, oh my gosh, it didn't hurt, or way, way, way better. And so when I get that and I say, okay, now we didn't change anything about your spine, but we just gave you a little bit of external support. And I'm not saying you're going to live your life this way, but right now, when it's agony to get in and out of the car, it must have been agony to get dressed, agony to get off the toilet. Daily life is very painful for you right now. This is how you get through daily life. And then I teach them how to hinge so they can use the sink to wash their face, contact lenses, all that sort of stuff. And so for my people who are like the worst of the worst, I just treat them those principles. I don't measure their range of motion because it's going to suck. I mean, you can see them from 20 feet away that these people can't move without pain. I'll do a quick neural screen because I want to know if they got any weakness, if they've got any sensory loss, if the reflexes are gone. But that's really the only true evaluation I do with them. For people who are really miserable, I allow them to make day-to-day life their rehab. I teach them how to get in and out of a chair, how to roll out of bed, all of those things without the pain. And I use it as examples. If I have a bruise on my arm and I hit it, and then I hit it again and again and again and again, my arm is going to become so sensitive that I hardly have to touch it, and it's going to hurt like hell. And I know if I glance on my arm, that's not harming me. But I also know that tissue got so sensitive that even the tiniest bit of force friggin' hurts, right? And when you can explain it to them like that, now when you lock your lats or do whatever technique I taught them, whatever one works for them, I said, that's one more time you didn't hurt the bruise. And if you can go all day hitting that bruise 20 fewer times, that bruise can go away. And then as you no longer have to be so deliberate and so careful with these little movements, then we just really get rocking. And that's how I would take that person to give them confidence, because I now just gave them the skill where they can do the things that before were agonizing and now are immediately way, way, way better. That's a big deal. And so I like doing that with them. For the people who are like, yeah, my back hurts. I don't feel like doing, I'm not going to the gym now, or I just go in, I walk on the treadmill, I don't lift, or, those kinds of people where their back pain is an annoyance, but not an impediment to life. If they didn't tell me the back hurt, it wouldn't be obvious. Those are the people where I ask a lot of questions. That's where I'm concerned about. Does your big toe move well enough? Did you break your ankle 10 years ago? Any of those sorts of things, because it all connects and works its way up the chain. And when people fill out like our every place you go, fill out the little form, right? The little, tell me about your past medical history. Well, what I've come to learn is you fill out what you think is relevant. Mm-hmm. You don't want to fill out that form. When I'm there, I don't want to fill out that form. So I don't trust that you filled out everything I want to know. So I'll look at that form and say, oh, you had ACL surgery in high school and you take a statin or something. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because that's an old separate can of worms. But whatever. Something about, yep, and that's all your medical history? Okay. And then what I do is I start at the feet and I start asking, so how are your feet? Do your big toes move well? Do you have any plantar fasciitis? Wear orthotics? Oh, yeah, I've got orthotics. Oh, who gave them to you? Oh, so-and-so. What for? I have plantar fasciitis. Do you still have it? No. You still wear the orthotics? Yeah. Think you need them? I don't know. All right. How are your ankles? You ever sprain them? Play basketball? And I just work my way up. And when you start at the feet and work your way up, I just do that so I don't forget something, right? And so for me, it's ground up to make life simple on me so I don't forget. But when you ask very specific symptoms about people, you realize, they said that they had an ACL surgery and that was it. But you find lots of other stuff so often. And that's what I love about my practice in Arizona now, is I've got more time than what I had. Is I no longer take insurance. So I don't need to interrupt you to get to kind of the chase. I'll let you tell your story, and then I'm asking even more. And the value to that is remarkable. And so now when I know that you've got bad feet and you've been wearing orthotics all the time, that lets me know how you and gravity are starting to interact with one another, ask about your shoes, and you just work your way up. And so if you've got back pain and the person that you're seeing only asks you questions about your back and, only gives you exercises that look like they're just for your back, there might be more out there. And just recognizing that things from far away can make a difference to where your pain is. There's a guy, his name is Carl Levitt, looks like Carol Lewitt, but it's pronounced Carl Levitt. He who treats the site of pain is often lost. And I like using that quote a lot. Not to say that you can't or you shouldn't, but boy, if you only look where they tell you it hurts right here and you only look right there, you're going to miss stuff without question. So just being able to take the time and branch out and ask a lot of questions and investigate movement and recognizing how things should work together. And when they don't, oftentimes that's your source.
Yeah.
But there's always a reason.
Yes. There's
always
a reason. And very often it's not the reason you think it is.
Right. Yeah.
This gets me thinking about Dr. Ellen Langer. She's one of her labels is like the mother of mindfulness. She's run more experiments on the power of the human mind affecting your physiology, affecting your biology than anybody. And also all of her incredible students have gone on to create all these incredible studies as well, like Alia Crum out of Stanford. But I'm saying that to say that the most important part of this is your mind. And that's one of the things, the emphasis on therapy part with physical therapy. because one of the things that you did for me was to reestablish my confidence. And it happened so quickly because I was super uncomfortable doing a very simple act, right? He was like, go ahead and touch your toes. I was like, whoa. I know my spine looks great now, but I don't want to irritate anything. Everything's going so well. I was afraid.
Hyper protective. Yep.
Right. And once I did it, it just was like, wow, I did it. Like, but just you giving the cue, and also there was a patience that you had for me that I can't really explain. Like you made me confident that I can try, right? And it was okay if it didn't go the way that I didn't want it to go, but also it reminded me too that I was looking for pain. I was looking for a problem rather than like, yo, I feel really good right now, right? It's been a significant amount of time. I'm doing all these other activities, but I'm afraid to do this simple act right now. And so can you talk a little bit about that, about helping people to reestablish that confidence?
Yeah. You just reminded me of whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Right. There's nothing wrong with bending over and touching your toes. I mean, we can argue all day if you want to do that under load. I wouldn't do that guy, but I know you can train for it. You can train for anything. The people out there over the minutia of something like a Jefferson curl or whatever. But for the typical person, bend over and touch your toes. If it causes you pain, then you can bend over to some degree, and then you just have to figure, why can't you get further than that? It's generally speaking, no load, no injury, right? And so you shouldn't be afraid to move your own body through space, especially when you do it slowly and carefully. The body usually will whisper before it screams. So if you go slowly and you start to get some signal, what I'll tell people, if the pain is small and it's acceptable to you, whatever that means, because it's yours, not anyone else's, so nobody else's opinion matters. But if it's acceptable to you, breathe your way through it and see if it doesn't get a little less on an exhale, and then go a little further. It'll probably talk to you again. Well, you breathe again and you might get a little bit further. And then just come out of it every so often and just kind of make friends. There's more than one way to touch your toes. You can try it in standing. You can try it in sitting. I had a guy one time come in to see me for his back. It was kind of fun with him. Asked him to, bend over, touch his toes. He got somewhere past his knee, not very far, obviously didn't go very far. And I said, what do you feel? He goes, my hamstrings are really tight. How often do you stretch them? Every day. For how long? Years. I guess you don't need to stretch them then. What are you talking about? They're tight as hell. You just told me you stretch them every day for years. If years of stretching every day didn't get the job done, I'm not so sure another day is going to make a difference for you. And he wasn't able to get that. And I said, so I took a gamble, but it worked. I said, sit on the floor with your legs in front of you. And he went out, touched his toes without a problem. I'm like, do you even realize what you just did? No, what? I'm like, dude, you just touched your toes. You just told me you couldn't do that because your hamstrings are tight. Wait a minute, right? And it was so funny because he just didn't even get it. I'm like, so when you're upright standing, your brain is afraid you're going to fall on your face because you're not shifting weight effectively. But when you're sitting on the floor with your legs long in front of you, that concern is gone. So you were able to demonstrate the flexibility that you actually have. You can't demonstrate that in standing, but that ain't a flexibility problem. That's your brain saying, whoa, pulling on those hamstrings back there. We don't trust you. So it created a perception of threat. And if a threat is perceived, it may as well be real because you act the same way. Right. Now that I live in Phoenix, I always use the example, if we go for a walk and there's a stick on the ground and I think it's a rattlesnake, I'm jumping as if it's a rattlesnake. It was never a threat to me, but I sure as hell thought it was, right? And so even if something has no chance of harming me, if I believe it will, I'm going to act accordingly. So sometimes especially if the original injury was a flexion-oriented activity, we've all got a little PTSD for that plane of motion, right? So sometimes you just have to help people get it in a different way. But I have every expectation. It's a norm, right? I use an example sometimes, if you don't graduate from high school, you may very well have a wonderful life. You just made it harder on yourself. If you can't touch your toes, you can still have a wonderful life. You're just making it harder on yourself. It's a norm for a reason. And so let's look to establish that norm.
Yeah. That you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a protective response, right? And So often, and this is one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, when we have that protective response, we tend to treat it like an injury, like I'm injured, something is seriously wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you advocate for us to treat it like a protective response.
Yeah, we use the term muscle guarding.
Muscle guarding. Your body is doing this for a reason. Let's investigate why, versus putting all of our chips in like you have a severe injury, because that is very likely going to make that process of getting well so much longer.
For sure, without question. Yeah, you're kind of validating your own fears.
So what do we do instead?
Baby steps, right? So, depending on the level of confidence of the person and level of disability by their pain, you can just think, what plane of movement feels like it's okay to you? What plane of movement is the scariest? We're going to get there eventually, but why pound a square peg in a round hole on day one, right? So also depends, where are we on the journey for this person too, right? But if someone comes to see me and they have a history of a lot of pain, but not a lot of damage per se. With my job, I'm going to compare your active movement relative to your passive. So let's say you are in agony and you can't, like, you just touch your toes because it's so common. You can't touch your toes at all. You stand and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like you just, lot of questioning whether or not this is a bad idea and everything. I'm like, okay, we don't have to do any more than that. Why don't you lay on this table for a minute? And then I can bend their knee towards their chest. Well, that means their hip is capable of flexing. Maybe I can bring a straight leg raise up. Well, there's your hamstring flexibility when there's no load on it. Compare the other sides. And then if I can do that, I say, hey, check this out. What? Because they're just laying there kind of zoning out. Most people don't pay too much attention. And I bring their leg up to a 90-degree angle with their straight leg, which requires a lot of hamstring flexibility, right? I said, look what your hamstring can actually do. Oh, really? That's good. I didn't think I could do that. So, right? And then you do the other side, and then you do that. So then all of a sudden now they see that the parts are okay if you separate them out and I move it for them. And when I say, if your hamstring didn't have flexibility, not only would you not touch your toes, but I'm not able to do this either, right? And so you just start finding different ways by looking at passive movement versus active. And same thing, if people say they can't twist. Oh gosh, I can't twist. That really hurts. And you see it all over their face. There's a lot of apprehension. They kind of give it a go because I asked them to. But then you put them on a table and you can roll them all the way around a corner. And I say, you recognize what we're doing here, right? Like if you're on the table and I do it for you, you actually rotate pretty well. It's just when you're standing, you can't. And when you start explaining them to that, and you say, okay, can we think of this more as a software problem less than a hardware problem? And that's usually when the confidence and, they start kind of, oh, you're connecting some dots for me a little bit here, right? And then you just challenge them in a way that doesn't feel scary to them, whatever that is. And I'll bring it all the way back to just diaphragmatic breathing if I have to, and then we'll build it up from there. But, you just regress to the level of their comfort and progress back out from there. But you can always do that.
So one of the big takeaways already for everybody is, and this is going to be like Captain Obvious, is to do what we can.
For sure.
To do what we can. And we're going to be shocked oftentimes when we put our bodies into different positions, how we can do things that we can't do when we're in other positions.
For sure.
Right? And so again, then that's going to give you some feedback, but that this is a protective response. And your body's like, when you're in this position, I don't feel comfortable letting you do that thing.
Yep.
Right? And I wanted to ask you, and just circle back a little bit, when somebody, and I don't know if there's any data on this, I kind of do, but
of course you do.
when somebody's dealing with, we'll just say an injury on one side of the body, right? So it's one of their legs is injured, or one of their arms, one of their shoulders. Is there any benefit to training the other side of the body?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dealing with that.
Yeah. So let's say my shoulder surgery, I'm in a sling, I'm not allowed to do anything. Well, if it's my shoulder, I still got shoulder blade, right? I still might have some spine, and I can ride a bike. I could press and pull, which is where I think you're probably going with. I think, the left side of your brain takes care of the right side of your body and vice versa. And there's some small amount, single digit %. I don't remember the number anymore. It goes back a very long time from PT school, but it's 7, 8, 9%, something like that. So if I'm, say, for my shoulder, I'm doing a one-arm bench press and I'm working hard. It won't work with a light load. It has to be a challenging load. So I've got a challenging load, like say 5 RM or something of that nature. there's going to be so much effort for my 5RM here that there's going to be a little bit of crossover there. So the brain is communicating to those same muscles, even though it's in a sling and I'm not doing anything. And interestingly enough, with visualization, that's a big piece too. Have people say, hey, I know your arm can't move, but I want you to do this. And while we're pressing at this, in your mind, you're seeing both arms do that bench press. Or I know you just had back surgery, you can't move, but in your mind, I want to see you walking as gracefully as you ever have. I want to see you swinging the golf, I want you to see you swinging the golf club with the best swing you've ever had. And because when you start envisioning those things, the parts of the brain that make it actually happen are coming to life. And so we want to take advantage of that. So anything you can do like that. Again, doing nothing is never your best move. Never say never, but very, very seldomly. And I hope no one ever listening to this is in that position. But by and large, there's almost always something you can do. And, if you got one leg in a cast, like you're, leg pressing or whatever you can do, try to get a pistol squat, something like that. There will be some benefit of doing that. It's not huge, but it's better than nothing. And that's what you got when you're doing nothing.
Oh,
right.
Man, this is so good. Thank you for bringing this up. You don't know this, but it actually, as of this recording, the episode is out, but we just did an episode interviewing, she's Nike's first mental fitness coach. And we talked about visualization, the power of visualization.
There's good data on that.
There's so much, man. It's so much, whether we're talking about performance with Olympic athletes, improving 3-point percentage with collegiate athletes and free throws and all this stuff by visualizing, but also accelerating healing is another really powerful domain. And you said the words, which is, when you are visualizing, your brain, in many ways, like it doesn't know the difference between
which is really remarkable.
Us doing the thing in the world and thinking about the thing. Those circuits are running, right? And so if you want to engage those circuits and kind of wake things up, it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah, particularly if you're laying there, you got crutches, your legs in a cast or a brace or what have you. Well, what else you got?
Yep.
Right. So work on a diaphragmatic breathing pattern, do a lot of visualization. But, so many of the things that are factors in performance are also factors in rehab. So, like I was saying, that I learned from Stu McGill when he's talking about, the same cues you would give a power lifter to lift, hundreds of pounds, you give to this sweet person in front of you that is on the edge of tears, just trying to do the most simple movement. It's a powerful tool.
You mentioned breathing a couple times. Why? What do you mean by diaphragmatic breathing?
Diaphragm's a muscle. And if we are breathing diaphragmatically as we're supposed to be, it's like the first domino. When you're a kid, you just stack dominoes and you get this big long trail of dominoes through the house. You tip one over and then all of them go. Diaphragmatic breathing is the first domino to lots and lots of stuff. Musculoskeletally, it's how your core is, quote, quote, on without you having to think about it. So if you were going to pick up something heavy, you know what you're doing, you'd brace, right? But what about when you open a door that you thought was unlocked and it turns out it was locked and it gives you that jar or anything that happens that's unexpectedly? Well, if you didn't have the brace on in the first place, then that's going to jar you and that might not feel so great, right? So when we breathe diaphragmatically, the diaphragm is a muscle that's shaped like this when it's at rest, like so. And
shaped like what for people listening?
Oh, sorry. I want to show you the camera. Is like a dome or like an umbrella, if you will. And when you inhale, it goes inferiorly down towards your pelvis. Okay. And so when I inhale, it does that. And it's very elastic. So exhale is generally effortless with relaxed breathing. Obviously, you can force air out if you choose, but it's elastic. So when the muscle relaxes, it just shoots right back up. Now, when I inhale and it goes downward towards my pelvis, the bottom of the pelvis has a muscle group that looks a whole lot like your diaphragm upside down. That's referred to as a group called the pelvic floor. And so when I breathe and my diaphragm is moving inferiorly, now it's pushing all of the abdominal contents onto that pelvic floor like a hammock. And that creates a little gentle stretch. Well, what does every muscle do reflexively when you stretch it? It contracts. So now the act of breathing just made my pelvic floor turn on. But my air doesn't, or my body doesn't just go that direction when I inhale with my diaphragm. It expands all the way around. So my entire waistband expands and it moves inferiorly. So the inferior travel gets the automatic stretch out of my pelvic floor, but my innermost abdominal, innermost lower back muscles, the multifidi and the transverse abdominis, if you care about the name, doesn't really matter though, those get stretched and those contract. So the very act of breathing with my diaphragm makes the top, the bottom, the front, and the back of this cylindrical thing we all call the core these days contract. So if I breathe diaphragmatically, I have a little bit of stability at all times. And the average person breathes like 22,000 times a day. So if 22,000 times a day, we have core muscle contraction, that's a nice little safety net. And it's not huge, but it's something. I always tell, what if I gave you 22,000 pennies? Oh, that's nice every day. Well, that's not a bad little lottery ticket right there, right? So even though it's only a small amount, it's a small amount times 22,000 every day with zero effort on your part. And a lot of times people lose their diaphragmatic pattern. They're breathing up here, and that's referred to as an apical pattern, breathing into the apices of the lungs. Inefficient, and it tells your brain you're in fight or flight mode. Fight or flight versus rest and digest, right? And so what do you think muscle tone does when you're in fight or flight mode? I don't know why my neck is hurting, right? And so they feed themselves that way. So we talk breathing pattern all day long at our office. And so if you breathe well with your diaphragm, you're giving musculoskeletal support for your core. If you breathe well through your diaphragm, you don't have to use all these muscles up here to substitute, which leads to stiffness of your neck, shoulder, headache, all sorts of things like that. And so say you hurt your back and now you're stressed because it was scary, it was painful, you have questions about what you may or may not be able to do, maybe there's time off of work, all those other things, and now you're stressed. Now how are you breathing? Right? So people tend to breathe up here when they're stressed. Just like a kid, I always use an example. If one of my kids fell and skinned their knee, they'd be, Dad, right? That's the breathing. Calm down, honey. It's going to be okay. And they get back down diaphragmatic again. Well, sometimes if you've had something big enough, especially if it's emotional, if it scared the crap out of them, like a car accident, something like that, that's emotional. Right? And they just stay up here and they don't reestablish a good diaphragmatic pattern. So when you do that for folks, not only do they start to loosen up here, they don't feel all of that. They get less sympathetic, more parasympathetic. They start establishing some core. They stop feeling so fragile to do stuff. It's remarkable. It's a thing that nobody wants to talk about. I always have to be really careful when I introduce it because I know these people are going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm paying for this. And you're talking about breathing. But once they kind of get it, that it's remarkable and they're very thankful we took the time to do that.
Can breathing well help you to heal faster?
I don't know if I'm Captain Literal, so I don't know if you mean the word healing as well as deliberate or what's the word, as specifically as I do. I wouldn't say necessarily help you heal faster, but feel better without question. Without question.
So breathing well can help us to reduce pain?
Without question.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, remember Lamaze breathing back in the day, right? Yeah. So there's a reason they taught ladies to breathe that way, right? It's think of a yoga practice or something like that. Anything that's involved breathing, you've got more tolerance.
To tie it to the potential to heal faster, I would imagine that the body is in a more restorative or healing environment is created when we're breathing well versus
probably.
When that's sympathetic.
It certainly won't be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. You may very well be right. When I think of healing, I think of like in a petri dish kind of environment, right? So you have a cut and, the cascade of inflammation and healing and all that. I don't know how much that would change, but it might. But definitely your perception of the pain and the disability from whatever injury you had will be lessened for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got this interesting thing happening right now. And a lot of trainers, a lot of, armchair experts are chiming in on like all the injuries that are taking place in the NBA specifically. Right. And so there have been a number of severe injuries, especially like the last couple of years. Right. A lot of severe knee injuries, a lot of Achilles injuries, like to, superstar players are like just getting taken out. And so there's been a conversation like, why is this happening now? Because it has gone up, we'll just say like 50, 80% versus like, the 90s or whatever. And this, again, these are not exact numbers, but it has gone up significantly. And my question is, why? Why? And, I've got you here because one of the theories is that it's because the kids are playing too much basketball, right? They're specializing when they're young, right? The AAU circuit, and they're just playing basketball year round. And it's just like too much load on these kids, and it's just accelerating the time when something breaks down.
Yeah, that was going to be. Like, I'll tell you, I don't know. I'd love to be able to tell you that I know. That would be my first guess. And for what it's worth, I'm a baseball and golf guy, so I'm aware of NBA basketball. And I know the storylines you're talking about. I would, if I had to guess, I think that's it. That certainly seems to be the issue with, elbow injuries in MLB. If you are a parent of a kid who has some athletic prowess, understand the only kids that get hurt are the kids that are good, because they're the only ones that coaches want to overuse, right? If you suck, the coach is not going to be pressured to keep you in the game too long, right? So, God bless the kid at the end of the bench. But I always tell people, and I've been in the kid coaching realm in the past, the most important thing for a kid to do when they're playing a sport, whatever it is have enough fun that they want to play the next year. Because I don't care if your kid, is 20 and 10, double, whatever. If he's like, this kind of sucks, Dad, I think I want to try lacrosse or something, and go to a different sport, then you failed the kid. I mean, nothing wrong with lacrosse, but I mean, when it becomes a job before it's a job, that's a problem to me. And so I think that when you see immature bodies that have school all day, and then they've got practice, and then they've got their specialized, like, maybe they have a dribbling coach, a shooting coach, whatever, in baseball, they've got a pitching coach, a hitting coach, and then they do conditioning. And then kids have got every moment of their day programmed and scheduled, be there, be there, be there. And these are children, right? I mean, the stress level is significant on them. I think if you want to create, let me back up. I'm sorry, I'm wandering a little bit. I can tell you with clarity from my training through Titleist that if you want to create the best fill in the blank sport star, the best way to do that is to create a multi-sport star until they're about 16 years old. The kids who play multiple sports train multiple movement patterns. They train with multiple different types of stressors going through their body. Just imagine that not only are you, as an adult, say, I always tell the pro players play less and they have more of a pitch count than your kid. And he's still growing and developing, right? You have to diversify, like you diversify a stock portfolio so you're not at risk by everything being in one thing. If all you do is play basketball and run and jump and cut and run and jump and cut and run and jump and cut, is there any wonder that the lower extremity soft tissues are wearing out at a younger age, right? But imagine that basketball player also played baseball in the spring instead of summer, or instead of AAU basketball, whatever, or played AAU but not their school team, or you just find some other thing for the kid to do until about 16. But that's kind of the line in the sand, with the exception of tennis and gymnastics, where you're rewarded at a younger level, at elite levels. But the multi-sport athlete becomes the best athlete. And so my 2 cents on that would be create a multi-sport athlete. And then if you've got a kid that wants to be great at basketball, and I'm making this number up, but let's say he's got 30 hours a week involved in basketball, maybe some of that could be in the gym as opposed to being on the court. And when I say gym, I mean the fitness gym, not the basketball gymnasium, but working on the ability to handle loads and stressors, and to be around a different adult too, right? Because in youth sports, they're being, how they think about things is being shaped by that coach. And so being exposed to other qualified coaches in other realms can sometimes be useful for perspective on them.
That's great. Great advice. Weight room strong, real world vulnerable.
There you go.
This is something that you're talking about as well, and we need to be educated about. It's awesome that people are getting in the weight room now. There's a surge, there's a movement and intention around that. And we don't want to put all of our eggs in the basket of just being weight room strong.
For sure. I'm glad you brought that up.
Talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. This is one of my pet peeves. So I just remind people that it's a 3-dimensional world we live in. And so you need to be able to handle forces that are forward, backward, side to side, and rotational, and usually all at the same time, right? And your child who you're paying to be trained by somebody, if they're training them like a bodybuilder, where you isolate one muscle, and bodybuilding is a sport in and of itself. Take your clothes off and pose for a judge. That's a sport. And if you isolate one muscle, one exercise, one muscle, that's a bodybuilding mindset. And that's fine. But that does not carry over to athletics, where there's acceleration, deceleration, multiple joints working together and in all three planes of motion at the same time. So there has to be some level of functional training in what they do if you want carryover to a functional activity like running and cutting and throwing and hitting and all the things that sports are. And you don't get that from back squat, and you don't get that from a bench press. And I'm not saying those are bad exercises. I'm saying that if I want the squat to carry over to fill in the blank sport, maybe I'm not going to have a bilateral symmetrical grip on a bar with a bilateral symmetrical stance, because I'll never be in those positions and have loads like that. I'm definitely going to squat, but maybe I would have more of a split squat, or maybe I'd have more of a single leg squat, or maybe like there's so many variations. And when you see the people that often run the youth conditioning programs, you have all the kids doing the same stuff. And, the most common, say, was probably football, right? And so if you're the guard and I'm the kicker, why would we have the same needs? Right. And if you're a senior and I'm a freshman, why are we doing the same exercises? Because you've been through this for 4 years now, and this is all brand new to me. Right. Do you really want me doing a power clean? I don't know. I've had kids with wrist injuries from power cleans because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And they were having the football coach had the kids max. Now, what could go wrong in a testosterone-laden high school football weight room with all your buddies around you, and you put an extra plate on each side and you're like, go, right? That's cool if the kid can lift more weight, but if you can clean a certain amount, that still doesn't mean you can make a tackle. It still doesn't necessarily mean you can cut on a dime and make change, right? So the training that these kids do has to involve all three planes of motion, has to involve arm working through core to opposite leg, because that's how they're going to run. No one walks like same arm, same leg, right? No one hops 2 feet at a time when they walk into a room or across a court, across a football field. So you have to have exercises that somehow mimic those tasks, and then you get carryover, because carryover is movement, plane, speed specific. Yeah. And so if I'm lifting super heavy, cool, there's value in that to some degree. But if the only way I ever work on a squat is a barbell back squat, you're going to get beat by other kids that are moving more athletically than that.
This is important for all of us, of course, with our kids, but we might not see ourselves as a quote athlete, but you are a life athlete.
Yeah.
And again, getting weight room strong, that's great. That's awesome. But we need to make sure that we're training to be able to be adaptable in this 3-dimensional real world out here,
right?
Where life doesn't come at you in a push-pull, everything's kind of symmetrical,
right?
Like almost never.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, and we're getting close and closing here, but I want to get some tips on some things that, and I know it's tough. You know a lot. But what would you say are 3 exercises that you think that all of us should be utilizing or doing on a regular basis?
Oh, man. Well, I'm going to be a politician. I'm going to dodge your question to give you the answer that fits my brain better than what you asked for. Fundamental human movements are hinges, squats, lunges, push and pull, right? And if you want to call it carry movement, or if you want to call it walking. So if I'm going to be exercising, I need to be thinking that I need to do push and pull somehow, right? And it can be horizontal or vertical, preferably both, because both matter, right? If all I ever do is train here, the time I need to be up here, I'm not prepared. So I'm going to have some amount of push and pull. I'm going to have some sort of forward, backward lunge. That is something like, hey, let's all go hiking. It'll be fun. And you haven't done lunges in 100 years. You just done bilateral squats in the gym. And now you're stepping downhill over and over again for miles on end. How are those knees going to feel versus the person who's prepared for those deceleration forces by doing lunges, as an example? So if you just understand that those are sort of considered fundamental human movements. So if you are a human, you've got to somehow address those patterns. So I'm not saying you can't barbell back squat, but I'm saying if that's the only way you do it, versus say a kettlebell front squat versus a split squat versus a single leg squat. You know, I have people just try to sit down, stand up from a chair, one leg, right? But what everybody should do is like, I don't know who everybody is, right? So what's appropriate for you and me and the next person are probably all going to be a little bit different because of our individual likes and dislikes, what we have access to. If all you have is a band and I'm telling you to use a kettlebell, that doesn't work, right? Or vice versa. So if you just think about the fundamental patterns in your exercises, just make sure that sometimes you squat, sometimes you hinge, sometimes you lunge, sometimes you have push and pull, both horizontal as well as vertical, and sometimes you pick something up and move it around. That'd be a carry, if you want to call that, or a walk, right? So if those are blended into what you do will be pretty complete. Doesn't have to be every workout, but learn if you look every week and say, okay, I'll give you twice a week for half an hour, rock on, week and without question, get all of those patterns in twice a week, half hour. And that's pretty manageable.
Got it. I knew you was going to skate around it, but you know, you're giving us the real stuff, you know? So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to throw out a form of exercise.
Okay.
And you get, I was going to say one sentence or less, but
all right,
maybe two.
Lightning
if you
round.
need to. Bounding.
For who?
I knew it.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about bounding. Bounding is when you take off on one leg and land on the other.
Yeah.
So that means that leg that you're landing on flies through the air and lands with a force greater than body weight. If that leg's not ready for that, that's an injury waiting for a place to happen. So for this person, bounding's awesome. For that person, bounding is stupid because you're going to hurt them. Love it, but just kind of depends on what you're ready for.
What about bounding for the majority of people, but like a bounding, diet bounding? All right.
All right.
I mean, like hopping from one leg to the next, like in place.
Yeah,
almost.
absolutely. Yeah. So basically kind of like almost like jogging in place, becoming, absolutely. Because that's your ability to use the elastic energy in your tissues, which makes you athletic, right? I think everybody, the shout out Cliff Harsky, be able, be adaptable, be athletic. So to me, that means you can not just do the thing, but you can do the thing in different ways. And you can do the thing in different ways where you might also add another thing on it, like bounding, right? So can you balance on one leg? Okay, then can you lunge? Okay, can you hop in place? Okay, then can you hop from this foot to that foot? That would be kind of the evolution of be able, be adaptable, be athletic.
Okay, two-leg jumping.
Two-leg jumping.
And you got
sure
2 sentences maxes.
100%. I'll have, LOL used to stand for little old lady. I'll have an LOL in the office and say you've got carpet like there where there's 2 tones and we're getting her up and moving again. I will hold her hand and I'll say, I want you to jump from the blue to the gray. And she'll be looking at me like I'm crazy and kind of bounce a little bit and move just a little bit. That's two-legged jumping, right? But power is the number one thing we lose as we age. It's not our flexibility. It's not our strength. We lose everything as we age, but we lose power the most. And so you have to be able to train power no matter who you are. You just have to bring it to a level appropriate for you. But absolutely.
Walking.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I'll have people, even if they're in that person with exaggerating back pain, how long can you walk before it's bad? 2 minutes. All right. Can you give me like a 60 to 90 second bout every hour? Okay. Right. And then you build.
What would you say to the person who's experiencing pain right now? They just experienced an injury and they're in pain and they want to get back to doing the things that they love. What would you say to that person?
Odds are in your favor. You're going to make it. That don't let how you feel right now go beyond right now. Because it's really easy. I've been there with my own injuries to think, oh, this is how it is now. And then it's a slippery slope. But it's highly unlikely if you're hurting that you're still going to be hurting. And if you need to find another person to seek care from, you seek care from someone else. And if that person strikes out, you seek care from someone else. In the world we live in the United States, if you don't get better, you are a chronic pain patient. And you may have just been let down by a system that doesn't allow very smart people to have enough time to think or to think outside of a protocol that you may not fit very well in. I've had that happen with me personally. Be your own advocate, expect to get better. And if you're not getting better, keep looking, because more than likely you're going to be okay.
Okay. That's all I got for you, man. This is
right on.
So rich, man. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anywhere that people can connect with you? Again, you work with people remotely, which is what you did for me. Where can people get in touch with you, follow you, get more education, all that good stuff, but also contact you and your team?
Yeah, sure. So T2Wclinic.com is my clinic's website. I've got a YouTube channel with a lot of what we described there, all free, obviously. If you want a course from me, I've got a couple that are at fixyourfunction.com. It's a nice place to go, and you can see some things you can get. I'll put a model discount code when I get home. So you guys can get a discount. Your listeners can get a discount. But those are the places to find me. Instagram at Dan Swinscoe.
Okay. Yeah. So the code, it would be like the code would be model?
I'll just put it model. Yeah.
Okay.
And create a discount.
Awesome. Well, again, man, I kind of shared a little bit with the guys before you came in that you've been instrumental for me. You were there for me when I was just uncertain, and this was 2020, right? Sports injury, everything was going so well. I just turned my book in and I get a really bad sports injury. And, going through the process of getting well, I was grateful. Again, I had the imaging, and the physician that looked at it, he was just going on about how good my spine looked, all this muscle tissue. He was just like standing there like, I was like, yeah,
that's me.
But why am I in so much pain? Why am I hurting? And there was this one spot where I was compromised, and being able to, of course, just get out of pain, of course, but then to restore my confidence and my mobility and my movement. I didn't just get back. I got better. I was doing more than I'd done for years. I was exploring more of my capabilities, and I was proactively challenging myself when I kind of went into autopilot, which you don't know that you're doing it, with the things that you're comfortable with and excelling at.
And we pushed you out of that comfort zone little by little.
That's right. And just got me playing more, really focusing on play, but also qualifying myself to be able to do those things. And so I appreciate you so much, man. You're great at what you do. You're world class at what you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
Our kids aren't moving, and they're not doing traditional physical education in schools. I think kids and adults alike are prone to really seriously sedentary lifestyles these days. And the reality is that if we don't move our bodies in a lot of different ways, a lot throughout the day, the result actually is pain and stiffness